The house had wide, quiet windows. It was beautiful, imposing, surrounded by a garden that was once the most vibrant on the street. But now, everything there was silence. Donna Helena walked slowly down the main hallway, her soft steps gliding over the polished wooden floor. Her late husband's portrait hung above the sideboard, framed by 2 silver candlesticks. Every day she passed by and made the same gesture, straightening the frame with her fingertips, as if smoothing out the longing. The pendulum clock struck 9, the same sound for decades, but now it hurt more than it comforted. The breakfast table was set with care, though no one else would sit there. A plain glass cup, porcelain saucer, fig jam she had specially made with less syrup, just the way she liked it. But it no longer brought joy, nor company. Only the ghosts of a routine that had outlived life itself. Helena was an elegant woman. Silver hair always well groomed, the soft scent of lavender, a quiet voice. People said she had aged with grace, but no one knew how many times a week she sat in the garden just to hear the wind, or how often she woke in the middle of the night wishing for someone to look at her, not with respect, but with desire. It was on one of those late mornings, sunlight streaming through the glass, that the phone rang. The housekeeper's voice was curt. The old gardener had retired. A new man would start on Monday. Helena said it was fine. She had no idea that such a small change would change everything. She returned to the sofa and sighed. The house was in order, but she no longer knew what she wanted in order. On Monday, the sound of the gate opening echoed differently. The man who walked in was tall, wearing a plain shirt and sturdy work pants. He carried a tool bag and a polite smile. Helena watched from the window, unnoticed. When he looked at the rose bed, he seemed touched by a memory. That made her narrow her eyes. He didn't seem like an ordinary gardener. When she stepped outside, he greeted her with a respectful nod. He removed his cap and said, "Good morning, I'm Daniel. I'm here to care for the flowers." Helena simply smiled, reserved. But there was something in his voice, not just professionalism, a softness. Daniel began working in silence. She stayed on the porch pretending to read a book, but her eyes wandered, watching the firm movements, the care with which he handled each plant. When he touched the old rose bush, the one her husband had cherished, Helena felt something tighten in her chest, as if a forgotten string inside her had vibrated for the first time in years. A breeze carried a leaf near her chair. Daniel noticed and bent down to pick it up. When he handed it to her, their eyes met for a brief second, and in that moment, the world seemed to pause. No words were exchanged, but Helena knew something had begun. Daniel came every day at the same time. Arriving promptly at 8, he did his work with care and left quietly. Helena, little by little, began watching more closely. It wasn't just how he tended the garden. It was the gentleness of his gestures, the way he touched the soil, as if he were listening to something no one else could hear. On a Tuesday, while watering one of the garden's oldest plants, he spoke without looking up. "These used to be very well cared for. It's like they miss someone." Helena, listening from the porch, replied with a quiet smile, "They do. They were my husband's favorites. He cared for them himself." Daniel nodded, and there was a silence between them, not awkward, but filled with respect, and something else that didn't yet have a name. That afternoon, as Daniel said goodbye, he left his pruning shears beside the stone bench. Helena picked them up carefully and placed them where she kept old love letters. That night, seeing the shears among the memories of the past, she felt a shiver. It wasn't desire. It was the anticipation of something that might bloom. The next day, Daniel apologized for forgetting. Helena simply handed him the tool with a smile. But something in him shifted. His gaze, once steady, softened, and she saw, clearly, a trace of tenderness in his eyes. Something no words could confirm, but couldn't be denied either. The following days were filled with small gestures. A glass of water offered from the porch, a shy compliment about a well-trimmed bush, a silence shared while the breeze moved the curtains. Helena began dressing with more care. She swapped her dark robe for a lighter dress, let her hair down, and she realized the world, once so gray, had begun to show color again. On Thursday, a light rain fell in the late afternoon. Daniel was about to leave when Helena invited him to wait it out under the covered porch. He hesitated, then agreed. They sat listening to the raindrops on the roof. "I like the rain," he said. "It feels like it washes the silence." Helena looked at him, eyes misty. "Sometimes. It's in the silence that we hear what we need most." Daniel didn't reply, but he looked at her deeply, and in that gaze, without any impropriety, there was something sacred. Helena knew right then she was alive, still capable of feeling, still capable of being seen. And as much as it scared her, it also made her want to keep feeling. On Saturday, Helena went to the garden alone. It was early, the sun just waking between the trees. She walked slowly among the flower beds Daniel had tended, noticing how the blooms looked livelier, how the scent of damp earth felt sweeter. She felt different, as if opening windows inside herself after years locked away. She stopped before the rosebush her husband had cherished. She'd never had a green thumb, but right then she wanted to touch the petals. She thought of Daniel's face, the way he cared for each flower, and without knowing why, she knelt and ran her fingers along the stem. A thorn scratched her lightly. She smiled. How long had it been since she felt real pain? Later that morning, Daniel arrived carrying a white rose sapling. "This isn't part of the job, Donna Helena. I brought it because the garden felt like it needed something new." She looked at the sapling, then at him. It wasn't just about flowers. It was a gift, a bridge. "It'll look beautiful over there," she said, pointing to the shadiest corner of the yard. They planted it together, hands covered in dirt, silence filled with glances, almost intimate, yet still innocent. Later, while eating lunch alone, Helena felt something stir in her chest, a mix of fear and courage. She took paper and pen and wrote just one line. "If I'm still allowed to bloom, then I want to, even if it's autumn." She folded the paper and tucked it into a book of poetry. It was a secret, a whisper just for herself. On Sunday, Leonardo showed up unannounced. Her eldest son, as always, came in talking loudly, criticizing the house, asking why the table wasn't set with silverware. Helena smiled politely, as she always had, and offered tea. "I see the garden looks better. Did you hire someone new?" Helena hesitated. "Yes, a young man, Daniel, very capable." Leonardo raised an eyebrow. "Young?" "A bit, but respectful." His expression hardened for a moment. Helena felt the air grow heavy. On Monday, Daniel didn't come. Helena found it odd, but waited. Maybe he was sick. Maybe it was raining where he lived. Tuesday came, still no sign. By Wednesday, the white rose sapling seemed to droop. She walked to the garden more slowly. With each absence, a part of her doubted what she had felt. And for the first time, she feared it had all been her imagination. A kind gesture misread, a spring that would never bloom. But at the end of the third day, she found something on the stone bench. A freshly cut white rose. No note, no name, just the flower. She didn't know whether to cry or smile. The next day, Daniel returned, quieter, more reserved. His eyes looked tired, like something had wounded him. Helena welcomed him on the porch with her usual smile, though her heart was racing. "I thought you weren't coming back." Daniel looked away. "I had another job at a different house. Had to go." But something in his tone didn't match the words. She noticed, but didn't press. They spent the morning together, him trimming plants, her watering small pots. Not much was said, but the silence between them had changed, heavier, guarded. Helena wanted to ask if he had left the rose, but she stayed quiet. Was it too soon, or already too late? That afternoon she acted on impulse. She had a more elegant dinner prepared, lit the candles in the dining room, something she hadn't done since her husband's death. She played soft music, sent a note through a neighbor boy. "Stay, if you can, for dinner, just as friends who love flowers." Daniel didn't reply, but by 7, he was still in the garden, trimming lavender. Helena watched from the window, her heart quietly rejoicing. She put on a simple necklace and went downstairs. But when she reached the backyard door, he was gone. Where the new rosebush stood, a broken branch, a sign that he had left in a hurry. A cold breeze swept through the porch. Helena felt like someone had turned off the lights inside her. She went in, blew out the candles, took off the necklace, dined alone, as always. But that night, it hurt more. The next morning, Leonardo called. "I stopped by earlier this week. Didn't like the kind of man I saw entering the garden. That gardener." Helena froze. "What do you mean, didn't like?" "Just looking out for your reputation, Mom. Don't want the neighbors gossiping. After all, a woman your age." He didn't finish the sentence, but she understood, and the knot that formed in her chest wasn't from hurt. It was from anger. She hung up without saying goodbye. That evening, she sat in the garden alone, staring at the rose bush. If something was blooming there, it wasn't just a flower, it was courage. The next morning, Helena didn't come down for breakfast. She stayed in bed, staring at the ceiling, still wearing the robe from the night before. Everything inside her ached. It wasn't just Daniel's absence. It was the weight of her children's control. That old feeling of being watched, corrected, dismissed, as if she were still a child who needed permission just to exist. The garden was quiet. The flowers seemed to sense that something had changed. The rose bushes looked drier, and even the hummingbirds had disappeared. At noon, Helena got up with sudden determination. She grabbed a note and wrote firmly, "I'd like to have tea on the porch. Today at 5. If you want to and can, come." She folded the paper, placed it in an envelope, and gave it to the same boy from the street with instructions to leave it at Daniel's back gate. By 4:59, she was already sitting on the porch. The table was set with porcelain cups, butter cookies, and a teapot filled with hibiscus tea. She wore a soft blue dress, her hair gently loose. Her heart pounded like that of a teenage girl. But she was no longer a girl, and that was exactly what made it so beautiful. At 5:07, Daniel appeared at the gate. He held a small bouquet of lavender in his hands. Helena rose slowly, smiled gently, and gave a simple gesture with her hand. "Come in." He stepped in quietly, but with eyes that sparkled. They sat across from each other. The tea was poured, and for long minutes, not a word was spoken. Just presence. "I'm sorry about the other day," he said finally. "I left because I thought I didn't belong there." Helena looked him in the eyes. "And who decides where you belong, Daniel?" He didn't answer, but his face softened. They talked about flowers, music, and childhood. Daniel admitted he liked to write but had never shared his work with anyone. Helena confessed she collected letters she never sent. And there, in that sweet, late afternoon, a bridge was built. No declarations, no promises, but a quiet certainty filled their hearts. They were closer than ever before. The next morning, Helena climbed the stairs to the portrait room. It was a space where she kept old photographs, her wedding dress, and a few keepsakes from her late husband. She entered slowly, as if stepping into a temple she had built herself. She sat in the armchair before the large painting of Jorge, her husband, and simply stared. "You were a good man, but I'm still alive," she whispered. It was the first time she had ever said that out loud. She took the painting downstairs, dusted it, cleaned the frame, and placed it on a side table instead of keeping it at the center of the house. A small gesture, but a symbolic one. She wasn't forgetting the past, just making space for the present. That afternoon, Daniel returned to work in the garden. He seemed more at ease, more confident. When Helena stepped onto the porch, he smiled. "I brought a rosemary plant. They say it brings strength." "Then we'll need two," she replied. "One for me, one for you." As he planted, Helena watched him silently. She wondered how it was possible to feel so much just by being near someone. She didn't want to rush anything. She didn't want labels. But she did want him to know what they had was real. That night, Helena received a call from Marcos. Her younger son sounded hesitant. "Mom, Leo's been saying you're involved with someone. Is it true?" Helena took a deep breath. "I'm involved with myself, Marcos. For the first time in many years." On the other end of the line, silence. Then he replied, "I just want you to be okay." "I am," she said. "Or at least I'm beginning to be." Marcos didn't push further. Helena hung up with her heart at peace. She sat on the porch armchair, tea in hand. The night was warm, stars dusted the sky, and the freshly planted rosemary already seemed to give off a soft scent. She didn't know what was coming, but she knew what she didn't want anymore: to live halfway. On Wednesday, Daniel finished later than usual. The sky was painted in golden hues as he packed his tools, and Helena, watching from the porch, had a quiet smile on her face. She had made a special tea using herbs from her own garden, a simple gesture, but full of meaning. "Leaving with the sun?" she asked as he came close to say goodbye. Daniel hesitated. "Only if you want me to." "Ma'am is what they called my mother," she replied, smiling. "Stay a while." They sat on the porch like before. But something was different that night. Helena's laughter came freely, unguarded. Daniel told childhood stories, talked about his mother, his travels, and even made fun of himself. Helena laughed like she hadn't in years, a clean, bright, wholehearted laugh. "It's been a long time since I heard myself like this," she said, touching her lips as if rediscovering them. Daniel just looked at her. There was admiration, respect, and something growing quietly, like a flower in fertile soil. "You seem lighter," he whispered. "Maybe because I stopped apologizing for breathing." Daniel didn't answer, but his eyes said everything. When he left, he placed a flower on the chair where she usually sat. A simple gesture, but it was enough to make Helena cry from joy. The next morning, Helena was woken by the phone. It was Amalia, her old friend from youth. "I saw your name in the society column," she said excitedly. "Apparently, you're being honored by the city's cultural association." "Honored? What for?" "Heritage contribution. There's going to be a ceremony next week." Helena had completely forgotten about it. She had been part of the association since her married days, but hadn't been involved in years. Still, something stirred inside her at the news. For the first time, she wanted to go. She wanted to be seen, But with that desire came fear. How would people look at her? What would they whisper? Were there already rumors about Daniel? And worse, would her children be there? That afternoon, an unexpected visit. Leonardo showed up without calling. He looked sharp and well-dressed, but his eyes were as cold as ever. "We need to talk," he said bluntly. "Are you really continuing this thing with the gardener?" Helena didn't flinch. "It's not a thing, Leonardo. It's my life. It's a scandal. You're making a spectacle. He's a gold digger." "Do you know him?" "I don't need to. Just look at him." "Then look again," she said, her voice steady. "Because maybe the one who's blind is you." Leonardo stormed out, saying he wouldn't attend the ceremony, that he wouldn't be part of this kind of shame. For the first time, Helena didn't cry after an argument. She simply took a deep breath and walked to the living room mirror. She looked at herself calmly. "I am not a scandal. I am a woman." That same day, she made her decision. She would go to the ceremony, and she would take Daniel as her guest. The week went by in a strange rush. Helena tried on dresses she hadn't worn in ages, tested old earrings, and asked the housekeeper if wearing her hair up made her look older. There was something teenage-like about that ritual, but it also felt like liberation. It wasn't vanity, it was a desire to live, to allow herself to be seen with new eyes. Daniel arrived at the house on the night of the event wearing a light blue shirt, dress pants, and polished shoes. He looked nervous. "I've never been to anything like this, Miss Helena." "Neither have I, at least not on my own terms," she said with a smile. "Tonight we go as we are." They arrived together by car, under the watchful eyes of the local society. Helena walked into the hall with confident steps. Daniel by her side held his posture, though his eyes kept finding comfort in hers. The hall was full. Some whispered. Others simply watched. Amalia approached, beaming. "You look stunning." Then, in a softer tone, "And he's exactly how I imagined. You did the right thing." On stage, the host of the evening called Helena's name to receive her award. She went up, greeted by applause, but with a knot in her throat. She took the microphone and, before saying thank you, took a deep breath. "For many years, I was known as Jorge's wife, the lady from the corner house, the elegant widow. But tonight, I accept this award as Helena. Just Helena. A woman who loved, who suffered, and who is rediscovering what it feels like to have a heart that beats differently." A silence spread across the room, and if that makes people uncomfortable, good. Because what doesn't challenge us doesn't change us. When she stepped down from the stage, she saw Daniel's eyes locked onto hers. He gently took her hand. That was enough. They were together, publicly, truly. The phone rang early the next morning. It was Leonardo. His voice was tight with restrained anger. "You made a scene. You brought a stranger to a public event. Do you realize the embarrassment?" "Yes. And more than that, I'm proud of it," Helena replied calmly. "There will be consequences. There already are. I'm sleeping better." He hung up without saying goodbye. Later that afternoon, Marcos called. "Mom, I saw the pictures. I read the comments. I just wanted to say you looked beautiful." Helena paused. "Thank you, my son. And he seems kind. Different, but kind. He is, and he's helping me remember that I can still bloom." From the other end, Marcos simply said, "I love you, and I want you to be happy." After that conversation, Helena started seeing the world in brighter colors. Daniel came more often, sometimes just to sit next to her. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. But in the house, the portraits of her children now seemed to be watching her differently. The mansion that once held only memories was now the stage for a new beginning, and that disturbed the echoes of the past. That evening, Daniel arrived with a jasmine plant. They say jasmine only blooms when it feels loved. Helena smiled. Then let's see if it blooms here. They planted it together, in silence, like planting hope. The sky that afternoon felt heavy, as if it sensed something dark was approaching. Helena had spent the morning sorting through old letters. She thought of tearing some, saving others. It was a ritual of letting go, or reclaiming. When Marcos showed up unexpectedly, she greeted him with a tender smile. But his expression was different. "Can we talk?" They sat in the garden, where the freshly cared-for flowers seemed to breathe easier. "Mom." Leonardo hired a private investigator. Helena slowly turned to him. "What?" "He's trying to dig into Daniel's past. Said he won't let some drifter get too close to you." She took a deep breath. "And what did the investigator find?" "Nothing serious. But Daniel lied about where he lives. The address he gave isn't where he actually stays." Helena felt a chill in her chest. "Are you sure?" Marcos nodded, regret in his eyes. "I'm not saying he's a bad person, but you don't deserve more lies, Mom." Helena didn't respond. She just looked at the jasmine plant. It still hadn't bloomed. That evening, Daniel arrived as usual. He brought cheese rolls wrapped in a tea towel. "Brought these warm. Thought you'd like them." Helena didn't reply right away. They sat down, ate in silence. After a few minutes, she spoke. "Why did you lie about where you live?" Daniel froze. He stayed silent for a few seconds. "Because I was ashamed." "Of what?" "Of having nothing. Of living in a friend's tiny back room. Of not being able to offer you anything but my presence." Helena's eyes filled with tears. "And you think I'm looking for what you can offer? I think you deserve more than a man like me." She remained quiet, then said, "What I deserve is someone who's real. That's all." He held her hand. "I won't lie again, I promise." She believed him, because his eyes had always told the truth. 2 days later, the doorbell rang in the middle of the afternoon. Helena was surprised. She wasn't expecting anyone. When she opened the door, a nostalgic smile spread across her face. "Dona Cida?" It was the family's former cook. She looked older, but her hug was still the same, tight, warm, comforting. "Heard you've been the talk of the town, and I came to see with my own eyes." Helena laughed. "You're going to believe what people say?" "I only believe what I see, and I see color in your eyes. That tells me everything." They sat in the kitchen, drank freshly brewed coffee, just like old times. Helena shared between laughter and tears everything about Daniel. Dona Cida listened attentively. Then, holding her hand, she said, "People will always talk, Miss Helena, but when the soul stays silent out of fear, the body gets sick." Helena looked at her, deeply moved. "Do you think it's too late?" "It's never too late to water what still wants to bloom." That night, Helena wrote another letter. It wasn't for Daniel. It was for herself. "I'm learning not to apologize for loving again. I'm learning to stand beside what makes me feel alive, and that no one can ever take from me." On Saturday morning, Helena woke up with a different feeling. Lightness. She walked through the house with firm steps, opened all the windows, and let the sunlight enter corners that had lived in shadows for years. She went to the kitchen and asked the housekeeper to prepare a special meal. Then she went to the market herself, something she hadn't done in a long time. On the way back, she passed by the flower shop on the corner and bought a simple bouquet of daisies. They weren't anyone's favorite flower, but they seemed to say, life can be simple too. She placed the bouquet in the center of the table, and asked for 2 plates to be set. Daniel arrived earlier than usual. Helena was waiting for him on the porch, wearing a white dress and low sandals. "I thought we could have lunch together today." He smiled, surprised. "I'd love to." The table was set with care, silverware, crystal glasses, but nothing felt too formal. It was just beautiful, just her, Helena, whole. During the meal, they didn't talk much, but the silences were full of meaning. After coffee, they sat in the garden. He took her hand and said, "You know what I like most about you?" "What?" "That you don't have to pretend to be alive anymore. You are, and that makes me want to live too." Helena rested her head on his shoulder, and there, in that slow-moving midday, the world became small, just the size of 2 hearts that had found each other late, but still in time. The next day, Leonardo came back to the house. No warning. He knocked on the door in a hurry, suit pressed, face stern. "You have 2 minutes." Helena invited him in. She was in the library reading. "What do you want, Leonardo?" "I came to give you an ultimatum. End this thing with that man now, or I will take legal action." "Against me?" "Against him. I'll file charges for harassment, manipulation, whatever it takes. I have the means." Helena calmly closed her book. "You're willing to see me miserable just to protect your name?" "I'm willing to protect you, even if you can't see it now. What you're doing isn't protection. It's control. It's selfish." Leonardo turned red. Before he could respond, another voice interrupted. It was Marcos. "Enough, Leo." "What are you doing here?" "I'm here because I'm tired of watching Mom fade away because of us. If you can't respect her, that's your problem." The silence was thick. Helena stood up and walked to her 2 sons. "I love you both, but I'm choosing to stay with myself, and with someone who brings me peace. If you can't accept it, that's okay. But this time, I'm not backing down." Leonardo left without saying another word. That night, Daniel arrived with a bag in his hand. "I brought a lamp. I wanted to give you more light." "I already have it," she replied. "You." He hugged her, and right there, under the soft light of the porch, Helena felt it. She no longer needed anyone's approval. She was whole, for the first time. The following week was peaceful. No calls, no uninvited visits. Helena woke and slept in peace, something she hadn't felt in a long time. The garden was blooming with strength. The jasmine finally blossomed. And the white rose, the one Daniel had planted at the very beginning, was now in full bloom. Daniel spent every evening with her, no longer as the gardener, but as someone who belonged there. They didn't talk much. They laughed a lot. Sometimes they read together. Sometimes they simply sat in silence, watching the sky change colors. There was a peace that didn't come from the outside. It came from the meeting of 2 hearts that no longer needed to rush. One of those afternoons, he brought a small wooden box. "I made it for you." Helena opened it. Inside was a handmade notebook. On the first pages, handwritten poems. "You write." "I've been writing since I was a kid, but I never had the courage to share." "Why are you sharing them with me now?" "Because you see me, like no one ever has." She held the notebook with trembling hands. Then she hugged it, long, firm, and full. But that same night, Helena felt unwell. A sudden dizziness, tightness in her chest. Dr. Leal was called. Tests, rest. Nothing serious, but a warning. "Your body is reacting to everything you've held in for years," said the doctor. "But now, you're on the right side of life." Daniel stayed by her side the whole time, made soup, adjusted her pillows, read poems out loud. And Helena, lying in bed, smiled with her eyes. "You're my garden," she whispered, "and you are the flower I found late, but still in time." Months later, Helena sat on the bench in the garden. She wore a light yellow dress and a scarf around her shoulders. The late afternoon sun painted soft shadows across the grass. Daniel came from the back of the house, carrying a watering can and a small shovel. He sat beside her. "There's a new seedling today." "Which one?" "A flower called Hope." She smiled, but her gaze was far away. "If I leave before you do, promise me you'll keep taking care of this place." "Don't say that." "Promise?" Daniel nodded, eyes brimming. "I promise, but only if you promise me you'll never dim your light again." She held his hand. "I'm far too alive now to ever dim again." That night, she wrote her last letter, not to Daniel, not to her sons, but to every woman who, like her, had forgotten themselves to fit into someone else's world. Let no one say it's too late. Let no one believe love has an age, because when it blooms, it's not again, it's for the first time. Helena lived a few more years, lightly, truthfully, lovingly. When she passed, it was on a calm morning, on the same bench where she used to wait for Daniel, a book on her lap, a poem marked, and a flower in her hand. At her funeral, few speeches, but many flowers. Her sons, even Leonardo, were there, in silence. Daniel placed on the casket a jasmine branch and the white rose from the beginning. He cried, but with gratitude. Weeks later, Marcos published Daniel's poetry notebook. In the preface, he wrote, "This is the story of a woman who chose to live, and of a man who saw her. May it be read like a flower that insists on blooming through the concrete." And in Helena's garden, to this day, the flowers continue to grow,